Pretty cool video, huh? Well, I had a little bit of free time this past week, and no, but I do want you to know, don't get jealous when you see other people's gifts. Everything, at least for the last 2 years that you've seen, on programs or these videos, are all done in-house by epic people. So, fun thing about starting a church in a place where people have those skills to bring to the table. Now, if you're like me and you're like, I'm kind of a one-gift guy, that's great. There's a place for you here. We just won't let you do things like that. And they won't let me do it either, even though rightfully I could. Just not happening with my set of crayons. So glad that you're here this morning. Hey, if you were to ask me, Ben, what's your very favorite thing to inspire people towards? Or Ben, what do you love to see people discover in your church or just in your life? Or what do you talk to your kids most about? Or when you and Shauna can't sleep at night, well, she always sleeps. But when I'm up at night, anybody your head hits the pillow and you're asleep? Anyone? Anybody you're wrestling through the night, the brain doesn't shut down? We're the overachievers and we've got a lot to think about and prioritize and sort out. She hits the pillow, but if she happens to stay up late, if I can get her a cup of coffee, this is the kind of thing that we have spent the last 13 years of our lives talking about. And this is the thing, the same answer to all these questions. The same thing would be true if you said, Ben, when you get to the end of life, and you look back, this is the thing that I hope most to have centered myself on and have led as many people as possible to do the same. Here it is, to know what God's purpose is for my existence and to fulfill it. And so for the next 10 weeks, starting this morning, we're going to look at this concept we're calling one life. And I want to encourage you. I know none of us, probably even including myself, will be here every Sunday for the next 10 Sundays starting today. In fact, I know. Anyway, I won't tell you guys which one I'll miss because then the crowds will swell in and it'll be terrible and I'll have insecurity. So I won't tell you which one I'm going to miss. But no one probably will be here all 10 of the following Sundays. And so I want to say, keep up with the podcast. It's going to be this progression through a particular life in the scriptures. I'll tell you about that in just a second, but it's going to be helpful. And so today will be incomplete if you don't sort of follow along throughout those 10 weeks. There are so many lives that we could look at in the scriptures as I'm talking about purpose. So we could look at Abraham, and we've done that before. We could look at the life of Esther, certainly Jesus or Paul or others. But the one life that I want us to look at from the scriptures and begin to understand things about purpose in our own lives and context is the life of Moses. The life of Moses. It's been a great journey just for me over the last couple of months to get myself reacquainted and really to learn some familiar things, but to refamiliarize myself with some things, but other things just to go wow, I didn't even think about that or I never knew that. And so in a minute, we'll get there. Let me give you some context for Moses. We're going to enter his scene when he's 80 years old, okay? So it's good to know that you don't have to get your purpose when you're 18. He gets this when he's 80, but I want to let you know what's going on before that. When Moses was born, he's a Hebrew, so he's of the nation of Israel. That's what the family he's born into. They're Israelites. But at the time, the nation of Israel is enslaved in Egypt. And it's been this way for about 430 years. So a long, long time. So he's born into this. And at the time that he's born, Pharaoh, ruler really of Egypt, but also the known world, Pharaoh said to all of the midwives, hey, if you ever see a Hebrew boy being born, as soon as he's born, I want you to kill him. Thankfully, the midwives who were present whenever Moses was born, they feared God rather than Pharaoh. And you'll see in a moment why that's a huge deal to go against the grain, but they feared God rather than Pharaoh. Moses was born. They allowed him to live. His mom was able to hide him for 3 months. Now, if you've ever been around a newborn who screams their head off, I'm wondering, how many cases of Benadryl did she go through to keep him hidden for 3 months? But the text says in Exodus, that we'll see in a second, it says that she kept him hidden for 3 months. And it goes on to say, when she could no longer hide him, she put him into a basket, set the basket next to the Nile River, and that was, as far as she understood, that was her last, at least guaranteed moment to be present in Moses' life, because of the danger that was at stake. So Pharaoh's daughter goes and actually is the one, coincidentally, who gets the basket. And at the time, she realizes this 3-month-old needs to be nursed. She can't produce that. We're moving on. She can't produce that. So she asks the midwives to go find someone who can. And coincidentally, again, Moses' mom gets to be the one that nurses him and to spend those preschool years with him. Just so crazy. And basically, but then again, she has to give him up a second time. She has to give him up back to Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter raises him in the home, you can imagine, and sort of in the entourage of Pharaoh. Moses is now related to Pharaoh. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And for 40 years, he's there in Egypt, living really as Pharaoh's kinship, as Pharaoh's daughter's son. When he's about 40 years old, he sees something happening in the way of injustice, and he can't handle it anymore. What he sees is an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. And Moses, I want to let you know two things here. I think his initial reaction to the injustice is really from a place of a pure heart, but he allows, like so many times, we get upset, rightfully so, about things that are wrong, and then we can take it too far. So he gets rightfully upset, but he allows his anger to build, and it becomes really sinful, so much so that he kills the Egyptian with his bare hands. And he tries to bury the secret of this. In fact, literally tries to bury the Egyptian, but he's not a great barrier, so I don't know what that takes, but he's not a great barrier, so the Egyptian, his secret literally, figuratively, not only, but literally, his secret comes back up. And he's found out. And when he's found out, Pharaoh is informed of this, and all of a sudden, Pharaoh now wants to kill Moses for the second time. So remember that. Twice so far, he'll want to do it again probably, but twice so far, Moses, his life has been at stake in the mind and sight of Pharaoh. So Pharaoh wants to kill him. Moses flees in this moment, and he flees for the next 40 years. He finds himself in the land of Midian. He's a shepherd, never wants to return to Pharaoh, never wants to go back to Egypt, and you'll see why that is fairly significant in just a moment. So maybe you've read from the Bible about Moses. Maybe your only familiarity is with the Prince of Egypt, like you've seen the movie, or like maybe you go way back to the Ten Commandments and Charlton Heston. I don't know. But whatever your sort of history or familiarity is with Moses, you know there comes this burning bush moment in Moses' life. And if I were to ask you this morning, where does his purpose begin? Me too, before this idea for today, we would say that his purpose begins right there in the burning bush. But I want to submit something different to you today. I want to ask this question: where does our purpose originate? Where does our purpose originate? That's a question I really want you to think about today, because I think if we can get this one right, then it'll help us at least begin at the right place. And oftentimes we know if we begin at the right place, it helps us get going in the right direction in an increasingly likely way. And so I want to ask the question: where does our purpose originate? What's the genesis of our purpose? If I were to ask you this, the cool thing is, here at Epic, no matter where you're at, sort of in the spiritual journey, person of faith, you're not, all of us would be able to answer a question like this. If I was like, hey, where did your purpose in life originate from? Where did it come from? You would likely say this to me, and I would have said the same thing to you before this idea came into my heart and mind. We would have said something like, well, you know what? There was a day in high school where my teacher let me try this particular thing, and not only was I good at it, but I was passionate about it. Or maybe it happened at the university level, or maybe you went to a place that was different than your hometown, or maybe it was even a different country, and the environment there, you got this sense that like, okay, this is what I need to do. And if you're a person of religious or spiritual background, you might refer to it as a calling. Or you might say you had a vision for your life. There was a day when I was doing this particular thing, and God or something else spooky spoke to me, and I knew that this was my thing. And that's how you and I would answer where our purpose originated from. But I want to tell you that that's not where your purpose originates. Moses' purpose does not originate in that burning bush moment, though he might have answered that early on. I wanted to show you where our purpose where it originates. So if you have a Bible, we're in Exodus 2, really where Moses' story gets going. Keep a hand up if you need a Bible, though. We'd love to pass one out to you, tell you what page number we're on. Exodus chapter 2, but we're answering the question, where does our purpose originate? I want to show you where Moses' purpose originates and where ours does. And I think this is true. When we discover where our purpose originates, I think we can lean more strongly into what our purpose is. So we need to understand the genesis of it. I don't pretend to answer every question today. And for those of you that are action-oriented, I'm going to let you know this. We're not going to get to a crazy practical level today, but stay with the series, okay? I want to paint this picture of where it all begins, and we'll spend the next 9 weeks looking at where we go from here. So if you would stand with me, Exodus chapter 2, starting in verse 23 or page 30, for those of you that have a Bible that we pass out here at Epic. So glad you're here this morning. I really didn't know. I either thought the rain will keep people home, or the rain has kept people at home, and this is their one time to get out of the house. So thanks for coming. Exodus chapter 2, we'll start in verse 23. We'll read through chapter 3, verse 11. Quite a few verses, but I think it'll help us get the picture, the big picture of what's going on. It says, during those many days, the king of Egypt died. That was that particular Pharaoh. And the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro. Time out. Any of you that are married, can you imagine the only job you can get is with your father-in-law? Now, if he's awesome and you love his industry, that is great. Otherwise, loser. All right, so Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro. I would love, my father-in-law, if you're watching this, I would love to do what you do with you. I would. But this is what Moses has been doing for the last 40 years. So his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock. This is Moses' big job. He led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, while the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. And then he, that's God, said, do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, but I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. You may be seated. I want to take back the father-in-law thing, okay? If this is your purpose, I think it's great. In fact, you're going to find out in a few weeks how incredible Moses' father-in-law Jethro was. This real dynamic leader who had a sense of organization, how to prioritize, and how to really to kind of, in a hierarchical way, be able to give Moses this understanding of delegation. So great leadership lesson coming up in a few weeks. But if your father-in-law is great, he does something that you enjoy, or you just need a job, I think it's great for you to be working with him, okay? Just getting my guilty conscience over with. So like, where did that come from? That wasn't in the notes. So it's bad when you don't have notes. It's like, all right, whatever. Here's what I want to say. Before there was a purpose downloaded to the heart of Moses, there was a purpose burning in the heart of God. Don't miss this. Before there was a purpose downloaded into Moses' heart, before the burning bush moment comes, before he knows his role in the exodus for the Israelites as they exit out of Egypt, before there's a purpose downloaded in the heart of Moses, it's because there is a, first of all, purpose burning in the heart of God. Let me give you this, and know when I talk, hey, divine purpose or your purpose, every one of you in this room, every person, whoever is been created in the image of God, you've been created with purpose. So hear this, your divine purpose is always connected to God's purpose for a certain thing at a specific time. Always. Now, God's going to give us purposes that do not seem so divine at times, right? You ever had that purpose? Like, oh, suffering's a purpose of God. That's not going to feel divine. Waiting. Moses is 80 when he finally kind of wakes up to this moment, when God finally gives him this moment. Our divine purpose is always connected to God's purpose for a certain thing at a specific time. Moses only has a purpose because God has a purpose. You only have a purpose because God has a purpose. I only have a purpose. My marriage only has a purpose. My kids only have a purpose. Our church only has a purpose because God has a purpose. And when we can begin to ask this question, here's the question we typically ask, and I've asked it more than maybe any other question in my life. God, what do you have for me to do? Anybody else? If you've not asked God, you've at least asked a good friend, I hope. Yeah, like, hey, what do you think I should do? But right, if you have any kind of spiritual nature to you, you kind of at least believe God exists, you're like, God, what is the purpose that you have for my life? It's a great question. It's just not the great first question. Here's the first question. Before I ask God, what is his purpose for my life, I need to ask God, what is your purpose, period? Like, God, before this involves me, it involves you. So what is your purpose, period? Like, what are you up to? What do you want? What's beating on your heart? And then we begin to understand from there that we get purpose after that. But before this magnificent scene of the burning bush with Moses shows up, there's something burning in God's heart first. The bush isn't the first thing to burn in the story. It is God's heart, and it is beating, and it is beating loud. And you're like, okay, Ben, you're putting God as in person. I'm not making God a person. I'm saying this is one of those adrenaline-building moments, I think, even for God, where he's like, I am involved long before I ask you to get involved. It's good to know, isn't it? We feel like we're the first ones on the scene, right? We feel like nobody's in this with us. Or somebody, they will call us in the church world and in the business world and the technology world, you're pioneers, right? We're going where no one's gone before. But if we're leaning into God's purpose for us, guess what? You aren't the first on the scene. And this is refreshing, except for those of you that need to be. No, you don't understand, Ben. Right? So you go against God's purpose just to make sure you're the first one on the scene? That's a terrible idea as well. And I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. But the only reason that Moses is given a mission there in that burning bush moment is because there's something that God wanted to accomplish. He's not looking for a way to end Moses' boredom, though I'm sure for the last 40 years as a shepherd in the desert of Midian, boredom had set in. God isn't looking to relieve his boredom. He's not looking to relieve my boredom or your boredom. I'm a person that gets bored really easily. Anybody else? Like, some of you can stare at the same thing for days. I'm like, not me. We're off and running. This rain is killing me. It's like, all right, I told you to pray for it. I should have given you a couple caveats, okay? When you pray, all right, a couple things. One, if you pray for rain today, pray for dry tomorrow, okay? I can go either way. I can go back and forth. Never pray for rain on Sundays, people. My emotional well-being is tied to this thing, all right? I didn't know. I was like, either people will come out because they haven't come out of their houses all weekend. They'll come to church. I'm really surprised to see some of my Tahoe friends in the room today. I'm like, what happened? All right, we'll talk later. Like, no, they'll be in Tahoe. They'll be at Tahoe. Anyway, so you've done the pray for rain thing. But getting back to the Moses thing, before the burning bush comes, before God says to Moses, this is the thing I have for you. And that's all we want, right? Like you're in a meeting with even your superiors. This is not even a religious thing. You're in a meeting with your superiors. The first part of the meeting is supposed to be an hour-long meeting. Within the first 8 minutes, though, they tell you, we're going to do this, and here's your part. You want to exit that meeting at that moment, don't you? Because we're action-oriented. But God, sometimes he's not like, no, it's not time for your action yet. I want to tell you what I've been up to. And in verse 7 and 8, he tells Moses that. Look at it. We can have it on the screen maybe. Awesome. Listen to what God says. Listen to his personal involvement. He says, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I've come down to deliver them. He's saying, I've seen, I hear, I know, I'm coming down. And the question, if you're like me, the question is, all right, why in the world does Moses have a part in this at all if God's coming down? And I don't have an answer for you, but I just know this. I think it's ridiculous that God entrusts his purpose and mission to us. I think it's crazy. God, you are almost foolish for asking a team of us to come into this city and start a church. God, you're crazy to ask us to buy a house in this city. God, what you do, God, to accomplish your purpose, it's ridiculous since you can come down and get involved. You have all the power, and yet he is ridiculous when it comes to inviting us into it. He's crazy about it. This is Moses' thought. You'll see it in a second. You know the response throughout this series, if you know Moses' story at all. He's like, no, God, you have to send somebody else. That's crazy. But in a ridiculous way, he invites people just like me and you into this. Like, Ben, that's easy for you to say. You're doing God's work. Listen, majority of people, God doesn't want standing on a stage at a church. That's not your thing. Your thing's better. Better not for me, but better for you. I don't know what he's got for you in the relational purpose realm. I don't know what he's got for you when it comes to where you live and for how long. And I don't know what he's got for you when it comes to how you build your family. And I don't know what it is that he's got for you. I just know this. Before he asks you to get involved with it, he's involved. So he's saying to Moses, I've seen the oppression. I'm coming down. I'm going to get involved. And what you need to know, Moses, is before I ask you to get involved, I'm presently there. And yet, in a ridiculous way, he wants to use us. You're like, Ben, you don't understand my baggage. Well, that'll make it seem even more incredible then, won't it? Ben, you don't understand my limitations. And then comes this beautiful moment for Moses in verse 10. God has shared his heart. He's told Moses where the purpose originates from. He says, come, I will send you. You can imagine before this, Moses is like, this is awesome, guys. You're coming down. You're gonna take care of that Pharaoh, and you're gonna free our people. And we're all for that, aren't we? Like, God, do this. But our response changes as Moses' changes when God says, no, you're doing it. No, not solo, but you're doing it. Come, I will send you. Which means we've got to ask ourselves the question, what has God got us alive for in the 21st century? No matter how you feel about living in this particular city, and no matter how long you plan to live here, you're here right now, right? Come on, like we're going to start easy, we'll work hard. Are you here right now? All right. I don't care if you love it or hate it. You're here, which means you've got to ask yourself the question, God, what thing are you doing here? Listen, I do not believe God's got me on this stage and as the leader of this organization because he wants me to have a career. I'm grateful that this is my career. I'm grateful this is how my kids are able to have food, and this is how we're able to live and pay rent, and I'm grateful for that. But the reason that I started a church here with some friends is because we believe God was up to something for this specific time, doing this certain thing with this group of people. And this isn't about a church thing. I'm just telling you my own thing. I believe that the reason God called us here is because there was something beating on his heart. Listen, when we begin to sense San Francisco, I had never been here, had nothing in my mind that even could tell me. We were looking at 5 cities. I'd been to the other 4, and yet this one of all things. I'm like, what? Never been here. New York, had been there. We were looking at it. Boston, Chicago, San Diego, San Francisco, but it just kept coming back up. And then even when we thought it was the Bay Area, our team can all testify to this. We were like, which suburb is it out here? Nothing wrong with the suburb. I'm just telling you, this is our thing. Like, which one is it? Palo Alto, Emeryville, Daly City, Marin? Where is it, God? Berkeley? But no, we came to this great assumption that God's up to something in this city and in this particular part of the city. And we pray that'll stay true to his heart for a long time. That's why we're here. Now, when Moses gets this word from God to go to Pharaoh, you need to understand things are stacked against Moses doing this on multiple levels. So remember, whenever he left Egypt and was on the run from Pharaoh, he never thought about ever going back. Some of you have those hometowns, right? Well, it wasn't just that he didn't like it, it was that his life was at stake. He never thought about going back. Let me give you 3 reasons why this is so unlikely that God would ask him to do this. The first one is that Pharaoh was probably the most powerful person in the world at the time. Yes, he was ruler of Egypt. But when they get the grain, if you know Joseph's story, how it ends, they become the place with not just the power. Remember, power comes to those who are dictatorial, but they have the resources. This is what's going on in Egypt. Pharaoh's the most powerful person in the world. So think about whatever kind of person intimidates you the most. Maybe times 10, that's what Moses is being asked to do. Any of you guys, be honest here, back in the WWF era, anybody, 80s and 90s? It's like going up against Andre the Giant, all right? Google it. Ladies, this is like finding another woman who's wearing the same sweater you are. It's, you're like, oh, I didn't know they made more than one. Or whatever other mean thing you can think of about a person. This is what God's saying to Moses. I want you to go to who you know is the most powerful person. And it would be one thing if Moses had no history with Pharaoh, right? Like, oh gosh, I've got to go see this powerful guy. But he's got history. The different Pharaoh though, I'll say that. There's 2 different Pharaohs that each of them have wanted him dead. Go, I will send you. And the third reason why this is crazy is because for Moses' preparation to go talk to Pharaoh, he's been a shepherd in Midian for 40 years. I don't think that's the prerequisite for overcoming a world power. He'd been leading no humans, only sheep. Can you imagine? 4 decades with the sheep, now you're going to Pharaoh. It's like, let me work my way up to human beings of any kind first, and then we'll get to Pharaoh. And he's like, no, you're going from sheep to Pharaoh. And you're 80 years old. Not the way he envisioned retirement, probably. But sometimes what God wants to do with his purpose is have all of the odds in the world stacked against us so that he might show off doing his thing. Friday morning, I'm typically at 8 o'clock. I am on the BART or down here already, but Shauna had a meeting Friday morning down in Soma, and so I just hopped in and rode with her. She was nice enough in the rain to give me a ride down here. So I'd gotten out. I was working on a future message, and I get a text from her, and it says, she was back in the neighborhood. I get a text message from her, and it says, hey, come here right now. That can only mean so many things, right? Like, okay, if it's super serious, she would have called me. It must be that we got the adoption call that we wanted. It's got to be that. So I got in and realized she was talking to our person, and I was like, this is great. And I'm like, no, this is not great. We've been waiting on this phone call, or at least from this number, not this particular phone call. We've been waiting on a phone call from this particular area code, and we thought it was going to be the call that would take us to the next level. We've had reason to believe that we were getting really close to getting our daughter that we've been in process with for about 2 years now. But it was our agency calling to tell us that the country we're seeking to adopt from has denied us. And, you want to see the certificate because you're like, oh, maybe they're like, it's just not likely. But no, the certificate actually was worse. He's like, not only are you denied, but we recommend you be given to another family. That's what it states. Quite a blow. You can read about it fully. Shauna's a great writer. She blogged about it yesterday, shaunapilgreen.com. It's incredible to see a community rallying around misery. I guess that's a good thing. I know over 1,000 people have viewed it as of this morning. But it's just this blow. And to be honest, I thought I'd wake up Saturday morning being the eternal optimist that I am, and I just feel like, oh, things are awesome. And they're just not. They weren't. I thought, well, I'll give it 48 hours. I'll wake up Sunday. Oh, man, it's my day to do my thing. And woke up this morning, I'm like, huh. And then, people ask you how you are, and you're like, hey, man, you don't want to know, right? But I'll tell you anyway. And what I want to do is just say I don't know how it felt for Moses, but we're kind of in this, where the powers that be have given us this situation, and we have one appeal. So Shauna and I and our 3 boys all had to write letters yesterday. Now, if they deny my letter, that's one thing. But if they deny my little 6-year-old's talking about his big sister he wants, then we'll pull a Moses and Pharaoh. You can dog me and the 8 and 10-year-old, but the 6-year-old who says, I want big sister, signed Asher, age 6, get ready. But what I want to do, what Shauna wants to do, what she's given me permission to tell you is, like, we want to invite you to watch us through this. And as I've told people close to me, I want to say to you, like, our history is just, we've won a lot. There's not been anything in the last decade, a job that we sought that we didn't get. Our kids are super healthy. We've been to the hospital once outside of delivering babies. Never broken a bone. People love and support us here in this community. Our kids got into a great school. On and on and on. But I just want to grant you permission to watch us struggle through this. And with granting you permission, I'm not saying, hey, I'm going to give the right pastoral response every time. You're going to watch us struggle. You're going to watch the roller coaster. But we're not without hope. And we've been put in this place just like Moses was. I want you to look at verse 11, what Moses says. He says to God, who am I? That's a great question, right? It's a great question. And I'm glad that God answers it. He doesn't scold him. Moses rightly estimated what his chances were by himself. Who am I? He knows he doesn't have what it takes. And what I want to say to you is if you're pursuing God's divine purpose for your life, there are going to come moments there that you can't handle it. Your education won't get you there. Your wealth won't get you there. Your experience and knowledge, it's not going to get you there. And so if you never, along God's purpose, you're pursuing God's purpose, if you never get to the place where you've got to ask the question, who am I? My guess is you're not 100% pursuing the thing God's got for you. Because what God's got for you, he wants to show up and do something in it. He wouldn't have it for you if you could handle it yourself. He says, who am I? What does God say to him in verse 12? But I will be with you. Now, as I hang on to this, I am not saying that God owes me anything in this adoption. He didn't owe me this church in the past or in the future having success. He doesn't owe me our kids having great school experiences. And I don't know that that's going to happen moving forward. We've been so blessed. I don't know. So as bad as my wife would love for me to tell you guys, I'm 100% convinced that God's made me a promise that she's going to sleep in that bedroom we made up for a few months ago. I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that the cancer is going to go away for you. I can't tell you that the unemployment's going to end soon. I don't know that. But I love this idea. But I will be with you. God, this is hard, but I will be with you. God, this is expensive, but I will be with you. God, I've waited forever, but I will be with you. God, why can't we have children? But I will be with you. God, where's our church going to meet? The lease is running out, but I will be with you. God, I don't know how we're going to pull through, but I will be with you. Sometimes it's all you have, and you have to decide, is it enough? It is easy when we're winning as a family, when we're excelling and celebrating, and the church is growing, and the kids are doing awesome in sports and school, and our friendships are sky high. It is easy for me to stand here and say, oh, God, it's been with us. Look at it. But we're gonna stay in this posture as best we can. We are not letting go, and we are not losing hope. And it's not because I've been guaranteed on May 20th she's coming home. I haven't. So we move forward. Two things before this year began that I prayed that God would bring about in my heart and life, two characteristics. One is humility, the other is confidence. And as I thought about this text, I'm like, look at what Moses is saying. It's this 11 and 12, verse 11 and 12. I asked that God would give me humility because I know who I am. And that's not a negative thing, okay? It's not a self-loathing or hating thing. God, I know who I am. And God, I know that things you've got for me I can't handle. Humility because I know who I am. Confidence because I know who God is. That's what I want. Barring all the circumstances, positively or negatively this year, I want God to build within me confidence and humility. And let me say this to you regarding your purpose. Who cares if you seek out to accomplish something, you get it, your industry raves about you, your fans figuratively clap for you, you make all the money, and if that's it, that's great. But who cares if you succeed, like you kill it, only to get to the end and realize God's saying, that's never what I gave you. Friends, there's nothing more amazing, no matter what it looks like to the outside, than stepping into what God has for you. And when you do this, let me just encourage you one more thing. When you reject what the world has for you and you step into what God has for you, don't make excuses about it. May your joy convince others that this is the place you want to be. This is what's best. This is where I'm going. This is where we're headed. And may you not feel like you're missing out on what the world says you should want because you're getting in on what God has for you. 2 Chronicles 16:9, it says that the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to support those whose hearts are basically his. He's looking for men and women whose hearts are blameless towards him, trusting in him, confident and humility. And the last question I want to ask you as we close is this. Does the purpose you've assumed for your life originate in the heart of God? Don't just think as small as career here or as big as career, okay? We go through, remember, purposes aren't always eternal. There's sometimes like for this 2 years, here's the purpose, here's the preparation purpose, whatever. But however you would answer this question, does the purpose you've assumed for your life, does it seem like it originated in the heart of God? If so, press on. If not, tell God you're willing to surrender whatever it is you've been giving yourself to. And may he show you with great clarity throughout these next 10 weeks and for the rest of your life what it is for you to give yourself to. Would you guys pray with me? We're going to move into a response song and then a few baptisms. And I think this response song that Brad and the band will lead us in, I think it's perfect for this occasion. Again, we didn't get super practical. That'll come, I think, in the following weeks. But today I'm just asking this question. The purpose that you're pursuing, did it begin? Was the genesis of it? Is it in the heart of God? If so, know that his presence goes with you. His favor will be on you, I believe. Not that everything will be rosy, of course. And when we think about Jesus, he lived this incredible life. We're going to celebrate his life, death, and resurrection through baptism in a moment. Think about this. The only reason Jesus' life even had a purpose was because God originally had a purpose. Okay? And God's purpose was, hey, I see humanity, and I want to make a way for them to be redeemed into a right relationship with me. And friends, that's the only reason the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus makes sense. It's because God had a purpose. If you've not stepped into his purpose for you, even let's start there. Jesus did everything he did because God had an original purpose. God, I thank you for that purpose. Thank you that you love us more than we deserve, more than we know. And God, I pray that that would just flood our hearts first before we step into asking ourselves questions about purpose, that we would see your purpose lived out in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus and embrace faith in you. And then, God, would you unleash all of us, no matter what the world might say, God, would you unleash all of us in this community towards purposes that have their beginnings in your heart. Oh, God, where you make the impossible possible, where your favor is the greatest distinction, where your favor overcomes governments and kings and everything else that we might face. God, we lean in and ask for your will to be done in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's stand and listen to these words as we sing them out.